Three police officers in North Carolina were fired over racist remarks and even threats of violence toward the African American community. Now, Police Chief Donnie Williams recently announced the dismissals of Captain Jesse Moore and officers James Gilmore and Kevin Piner during a news conference on Wednesday. These officers were caught on camera talking about how they couldn't wait to go and slaughter N-words. Oh, well, great. Their conversations featured numerous racial slurs, criticism of black officers and the Black Lives Matter movement, and even talk and delight glorification of a civil war. So that's who these guys are, right? Oh, they're interested, right? Now, Chief Williams described these exchanges as brutally offensive and said the firings were extremely necessary. Well, I would say, I mean, yeah, I noticed the strong language here. He's like, extremely necessary. Now, police supervisor had found this footage during a routine inspection, so it's not like it was difficult to find. It's not like they had to go and root through video. No, they were, they were in their vehicle and they were just saying these things. They know that there's cameras in the car. And yet, they felt comfortable enough to go and say these things. And that is just, that really goes to the culture, right? And so, you guys think it's still a couple of bad apples? It seems like whenever we shake the tree, everything that falls out is generally a bad apple. I'm just saying. It's almost as if we need to start over again, this time without hiring so many racists. I'm just saying. These are people that shouldn't have any degree of power. How do you expect them to serve the community when they're antagonistic towards the people that make up the community? I'm just saying. Now, the police chief said, there are certain behaviors that one must have in order to be a police officer, and these three officers have demonstrated that they do not possess it. He said he was shocked, saddened, and disgusted, and said, please don't judge our officers based on the conduct of a few. Well, look, it's not just officers, right? It's the whole culture. They've got a bad culture. Police have a culture problem. And that culture is based on white supremacy. They're instructed to go into black neighborhoods because they say, well, that's where all the crime is, right? So go to where all the crime is, go into those black neighborhoods. But here's the thing. They over-police those black neighborhoods on purpose. And over-policing means exactly what it sounds like. They go after tiny little things, right? And of course, ordinances, are passed to criminalize these areas, to make little things a crime, to make basically anything a crime. And then what you're doing is that see, they're doing all these little tiny crimes. Since we're over policing the area, it looks like we got to continue over policing the area because that's where all the crime is. That's what Michael Bloomberg had said. Yeah, we send the cops into these areas with all the crime. And we over police the areas because that's where all the crime is, because we're over policing the areas. Bloomberg also said, by the way, if you forgot, if we don't find a gun when we're stopping and frisking people, right? Well, then that just means they left it at home. Come on, dude, really? And see, that's the whole point about defund the police, right? Is that right now, the police movement or the police generally have been empowered to go and basically solve every single problem, right? And we fund them to the tune of billions of dollars to do this over-policing, tough-on-crime approach. And we shouldn't be doing that. We should defund the police and instead use the money to reinvest in the communities. Right now, we're criminalizing blackness and over-policing in African-American areas instead of basically allowing the police to do what they're essentially supposed to be doing, ideally supposed to be doing, is protecting protecting the public. They shouldn't be handling things like domestic disputes unless there is violence. They shouldn't be handling a lot of different issues. We should be having people who are, versed in mental health, for example, social workers. They should be handling a lot of the calls that the police do, because generally, when the police handle calls like this, especially when it comes to dealing with mentally ill people, their first action is to use violence and to employ violence and intimidation. And that's not what we need. That's not effective policing. And so that's the problem that we have, right? That's why we should defund the police. It doesn't mean get rid of old police. It means massively take away their duties, right? Change what they're actually supposed to do. And I'm not going to call it reform because that's not what that is, right? Reform is weak. We should defund and change the nature of what they're supposed to do. We have to. So now, that said, the chief said it was essential to maintain public confidence in the administration of the city and the police department by doing these firings. But again, there's no confidence among Black residents. Not when the entire system has been set up from the beginning to send Black bodies through the prison industrial complex. I'm not saying this chief's responsible for any of that. I think he did do the right thing, but when firing racist cops it's kind of like a bare minimum here, because we shouldn't have racist cops to begin with. And so it is kind of the minimum. And perhaps there should be a policy, right? Or a screening of potential officers to make sure that they don't have a history of racist statements or violence or, affiliations with white supremacist groups like the KKK or whatever, right? I mean, that's something that you could probably do on a more local level, which might actually prevent instances like this, but still understand that you've got to change that culture. And I think these cops, the fact that they, felt comfortable enough to say these things on camera when they knew that they were being filmed and that people are going to see it, it kind of reinforces the fact that it's rotten to the core. They thought, I'm not going to get in trouble for this. And that right there, that culture needs to change. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.